being an activist, but what do you say to your critics?
Necessary for strategic plan.
Again, you're being an activist. I am not.
That's not appropriate, sir. If
Now, who are you with? What's your name? That's an appropriate question for you to ask.
You're going to ask how many questions? You get 3?
you're a stupid son of a bitch.
Good morning, Liberty lovers, Liberty curious, and anyone else tuning in to Friendly Fire. If you're watching live, then let me especially thank you for tuning in so early. This show is dedicated to interviewing libertarian candidates running for office and only libertarian candidates. As the name suggests, candidates will be asked some tough questions, but as a fellow libertarian, I'm not here to make them look foolish or fail. The show raises the bar for interviewing candidates, and by doing so, the expectation for candidates. The Libertarian Party is the third largest political party in the United States and the only viable option to compete with the big two and restore liberty in the rightful hands of the people. In this episode of Friendly Fire, I bring on Matt Johnson, who is running for City Commission in Deland, Florida. So let's go ahead and bring Matt in. Morning, Matt. How are you?
Good morning. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Nice and early Monday morning. Glad you were able to hop up out of bed so early for me.
Oh yeah. Busy Monday morning too.
I've been reconsidering whether or not I do the show so early. So one of the things I didn't really count on is that I'm on Eastern Standard Time. So 7:30 for me if I want to interview a candidate from, say, California.
Oh
it's
gosh.
4:30 their time. And
Oh yeah.
I didn't really think about that. I didn't, I kind of missed the mark on that one. So I may have to change the show, but for now we are at 7:30 in the morning. So glad that everybody's tuned in. Glad you've made it here. So let's go ahead and dive right on in. Let's just really quickly give us your elevator pitch of who you are, why you're running.
Sure. So I'm Matt Johnson, obviously from Deland, Florida. My wife grew up in Deland. We actually love this town so much that we bought the house that she grew up in from her mother so that we could raise our kids here. Only one. And I never really wanted to be a politician, truthfully. I hate politics.
Good start. That's a good start.
I always hated politics. Like it looked disgusting from the outside, and I'm going to tell you, it's even more disgusting when you're in the inside.
Right.
But the thing for me that really kicked it off was the COVID regime. I mean, when governments get to pick winners and losers and tell you that you're not essential, that was pretty much what the final straw was for me. I decided, you can't just stand on the outside and scream. You got to do it from the inside. When they're shutting businesses down and then those businesses never come back and they're telling you can't raise chickens in your backyard without paying a fee to the government. To me, it's time to step up and take the fight to the government from the inside instead of just from the outside screaming in.
So will you actually scream on the inside then?
I have been.
Okay. I'm just trying to figure out how literal you are being here. You might be, hey, you know what? You need screamed at, right? Like, there's that saying, some people need killing. Clearly we don't want our politicians killing people. So maybe some people just need some screaming.
Right. Yeah. No. If the need arises, there might be some screaming from the inside, but honestly, in my experience, you can only do so much from the outside, and at some point, if you want to change the system, you got to do it from the inside.
Gotcha. Okay. So tell me about the position, because I'm not terribly familiar with the City Commission. So go ahead and give me a little bit of an idea of what the City Commission does, the purview, the where their authority, if you will, oversees.
Sure. One of the things that's unique about Florida is we have what's called Florida Home Rule, where all of the decisions can basically, as far as legally, can be brought down to the localist level. So the City Commission is responsible for all of the local ordinances, whether it's the police guidance, property taxes, what you can and can't do on your property.
Mhm.
Ultimately the final say so in zoning matters and things of that nature.
Gotcha. So it's very similar to a city council. Do you not have a city council then?
It's the same thing.
Oh, same thing. Okay.
It's exactly the same thing. The difference
Okay.
is
Gotcha.
in the wording.
Gotcha. Okay, fair enough. All right. So I was taking a look at your website, and
Sure.
just for the record, everybody, website is mattfordealing.com. And in fact, I believe it's supposed to be up on the screen. So let me go ahead and get that up there. Bam. There you go.
Yeah.
So now folks that are watching, they can go to mattfordeland, DELAND.com, and you can check out Matt's website and you can check out some of the issues. So I was reading, and one of the things I noticed, it said on your website, it said Matt's not a politician, which you established, and probably a good thing. Nobody's, I think we're all tired of politicians these days. It
Oh
says
yeah.
he's a husband, a father, and a resident of the city of Deland, and understands the concerns of regular, everyday people. So here's my question. What are the concerns of regular, everyday people, specifically those in Deland?
You know, I jumped in this campaign very late in the game,
Mhm.
but immediately I wanted to take the campaign grassroots to the people and find out what the concerns were for the people. What the people had concerns with, and Deland is not a big city. It's a small town, and the people here really love the small town feel.
Okay.
Um, and that's one of the things my wife and I love about it. It's just one of those places where you go out in public, and it doesn't matter where you go, you're going to see somebody that recognizes you, and they're going to give you that wave and hey, how you doing?
Hmm.
Or how's your mom and them kind of thing.
Right.
um, and the problem that a lot of people have is over the last 4 years, or maybe a little bit longer, um, is the big push by the local government to turn DeLand into the next Orlando.
Okay.
They actually even have a word for it. They call it Delando, is what they're trying is what
Mm.
they're what they say. So what's happening is the city, by way of the planning board and the zoning commission, and ultimately the city commission, which makes the final say, is annexing huge swaths of um, green area,
Hmm.
wooded area, and they are bringing in out of town developers, and they're clear cutting these areas and um, turning them into planned developments with small lots, cookie cutter homes.
Hmm.
And from a libertarian standpoint, property rights, and if I own the property, I should be able to do what I want. I get that. But when the city is buying up these properties and forcing development that's unsustainable, the people have a problem with that, because they're building these houses that are $400,000 on small lots,
Hmm.
eating away the resources, and people here in DeLand can't afford that. They can't. The people that actually currently live and work here, they need different options that are more affordable, and they want options that are more affordable. And the more I talk to people out in the community, the more I hear that they're just really angry that
Hmm.
it's always like a 4-1 or a 5-0 vote on all of these um, developments, and they're really angry.
Gotcha. Okay. So, first of all, am I saying this wrong? I keep saying Deland, you keep saying Deland. So it sounds like I'm saying it incorrectly.
Yeah, it's still land.
Okay.
You'll every now and then you'll hear someone here in town call it D-land, because when it's spelled, the L is capitalized, so they
Mhm.
they kind of intentionally say D-land. But
Right.
most of the people here that have been here for generations, they call it DeLand.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to correct
Excuse me.
myself there, and I'll start calling it Deland. Call me out if I make any future mistakes on that. So when you say that the people are upset about this, and that the city commission has been voting like 4 to 5 in favor of these developments, what are members of the city, like, other than having a conversation with them and saying, hey, how do you feel about this? Are they doing, what are they doing? Are they going and raising their voices at the city commission? What kind of things are happening that kind of give you this vibe, you know, beyond the people that you've spoken to that
Sure.
say, "Hey, this is not what we want"?
Sure. So they're not just talking to me about it. There's a dedicated group that shows up to city commission meetings because they hold city commission meetings every 2 weeks regularly,
Mhm.
and then of course occasionally there'll be a special meeting to address something that has come up. For example, 3 weeks ago there was one regarding a proposed planned community on top of an old golf course. And what a lot of people don't know is that underneath this old golf course, there's been a golf course since probably the 80s, I think. Um, it's now closed. But underneath of this golf course is a landfill. And when I say landfill, I don't mean the landfill like we know today. This was a landfill back before the EPA was even a thing.
Okay.
So the old hospital used to dump medical waste there, um, and things like that. So we don't know the level of contamination in the ground. And the city commission heard public comment. We had the current chair for the Soil and Water District, who is an environmental scientist, speak
Mhm.
at the city commission and advised against approving residential zoning for 597 new houses on top of this landfill because they know the soil is contaminated.
Mhm.
They know it. I mean, it's been proven. They just don't know to what extent.
Okay.
So, in addition to her, there are plenty of other members in the community that have stood up at city commission meetings and said, this is not a good idea. We need to test soil first before we put 600 new houses on it. And
Mhm.
previously it was zoned for only 300 homes. So what they did was they ignored everybody that came to speak out, and they said, you know what, we're going to do it anyway. And that's typically what goes on. I've been to commission meetings myself in person, or I've watched them online. Life is what it is, and sometimes you just don't have the ability to show up in person. But you know, um, when you go against the will of the people and you vote for some unsafe nonsense, it's time for some change.
Sounds good. So speaking of your run,
Hmm.
I did a look. Looks like you qualified last month. The election is on August 23rd. And it looks like you've raised actually a comparable amount of money as your two competitors, Carlos and Kevin, who've raised, let's see what my notes here say. Uh, you've raised about 4,000 to their 1,500 and 4,000 respectively. So let me ask you then, since you've got a comparable amount, what is it about fundraising, or what method did you find the best for raising campaign funds, especially in a local race? And what's been your best use of it?
So I took a multifaceted approach. With regards to fundraising, obviously Facebook ads is huge. You can reach an awful lot of, a large audience if you have the audience. Um, you can reach them with minimal effort. Then, of course, face to face. But ultimately, what really worked the best was phone calls. Reaching out to the people, finding out, their issues, and hearing from me what I stand for. That was pretty much what worked the most as far as contributions, and as far as
Mhm.
what I've used them for. It's not cheap. I'm learning really quick. Uh, I used to think it's so stupid that you have to raise money and you get all these
Right.
fundraising emails and phone calls and ads. But truthfully, if you want to be in front of the people that vote, you've got to be in front of them, and it does take money. You've got
Mhm.
Facebook ads, you've got postcards or letters, you've got campaign events. Just to have a table at a hobnob just last week was $125, and that's just the bare minimum package. And it's like, okay.
Right.
um, but it's one of those things where it's kind of a necessary evil, where you've got to fundraise in order to be in front of the voters and say what you have to say, or even just to hear what they want to, what they have to say.
Right. So did you attend that hobnob then?
I did.
How
It
was it?
was
How'd that turn out?
there were several hundred people there. Deland's not a big town.
Mhm.
I think we have a population of about 57,000, I think, The last time I looked at the numbers, the number of regular voters is really only in the $10,000 to $15,000 range, and that's the people who vote in all 4 of the last elections. But there was probably 300 to 400 people there, well attended. What we stand for and the message of liberty was really well received, especially considering that most of the attendees were members of the Chamber of Commerce, who, as we all know, during the COVID, were told, you're not allowed to run your business, but Walmart, McDonald's, they're absolutely essential. So the message was pretty well received. We didn't win the straw poll, but I was encouraged by the fact that we had a decent number of people who weren't in our district or not able to vote for us. So I'm hopeful that the number of people that weren't there, and especially given conversations that we've had, I think we have a decent chance.
Good. Well, I'll be following your race for sure, and maybe we'll even have a follow up at a later point and see how things went. So, so that's pretty good. So, back to your website here. One of your issues on your website, and let's see if I can pull that up here real quick. Let's see here. We're gonna try it. Let's see. Gotcha. There we are. Look at that.
There we go.
I'm doing pretty good as my own producer, right? So not too bad here. All right. So on your website, you talk about parents' rights, and you mention that politicians run roughshod over the will of parents, and they're making decisions that they have no right to make. So my question: give us an example of one such incident where they've run roughshod over parents, and then tell me what you would do about it.
Sure. I'm going to give you an example based on personal experience. So my wife and I have a 6-year-old. He's 6 now. Last year he was 5, and as such, first year school. And just before the school year started, the city, this county, the school board had decided no mask mandates. Everybody knows about the COVID mask mandates, and personally, the government shouldn't tell you have to wear something or be a pariah. So they had decided no mask mandates, and school was going to be in person, and my son was super excited. So we're like, okay, sure, we'll let him go to public school because there were no mandates. Things were going to be business as usual, or so we thought. So we enroll him in elementary school, kindergarten, first year. He's super excited. He goes to school. 2 weeks into the school year, I believe it was, somewhere around there, the school board, which is local government, holds a emergency school board meeting, and the sole topic is should they bring back mandatory masking. And so my wife and I attended the school board meeting along with hundreds of other parents, inside the room, outside the room, both. And, most of the people who were there spoke out against mandatory masks, and that, given the science, children were not really at harm for COVID-19. They weren't carrying it. They weren't really spreading it, and they definitely weren't dying from it. So, needless to say, hundreds of parents all spoke out against mandatory masking. So the school board, instead, after hearing all of these parents, said, you know what? Yeah, no, we're going to vote for mandatory masking. It was a 3 to 5 vote. 3 to 2 vote. So 3 in favor, 2 opposed. The way they passed it was they passed it with a 10-day grace period. You could get a medical exception from your doctor. So they gave a 10-day grace period to get a medical exemption from your doctor. So we're like, okay. The very next day, Wednesday morning, after the school board meeting, where there's a grace period where they're not supposed to force it because you have 10 days to get an exemption from your doctor, which we had an appointment to do. We send our son to school and we tell him, Gabriel, if your teacher tries to put a mask on you or tells you have to wear a mask, please tell her, my mommy and daddy say I don't have to, and I'm supposed to tell you to call my mommy and daddy. So he did. That's exactly what happened. His teacher told him that he was going to kill her if he didn't put a mask on, and put a mask
Oh,
on and put a mask on him anyway, like physically put a mask on him.
like she's told him.
I'm
She
not
told.
even. That's what he told me.
Yeah.
I'm like, and this is a 5-year-old.
Wow.
So imagine
Right.
the emotional damage that can do to a 5-year-old. Like,
I
and if
mean,
she's
yeah.
telling that to all 30 people, all 30 students in her classroom, to me, that's ridiculous, uh, and also wrong.
Maybe you should have taught him to say, "Well, you could kill me with your shoddy education,
Exactly.
so we'll
Yeah.
call it even."
So what happened in the long run is obviously she put the mask on him. She didn't even hand it to him and let him do it. She put it on him, and we found out because as soon as he was done with school, he took it off and shoved it in his backpack because I wouldn't want to be wearing a mask all day either.
Right.
Um, so we picked him up from his aftercare, and he told us the story. And there's crust all in the mask from food and whatever. And so we immediately had a conversation with the principal and pulled him out. So we homeschool
Good
now.
for you.
So.
Good for you.
But yeah,
Yeah,
so
no,
that's just a prime example, and I know there are plenty of parents across the country and in Florida that have had similar,
right.
exchanges with
Yeah.
their
So
local
what would you
government.
have done about that? Well, I mean, I know obviously it sounds like you would have voted, against it. So hopefully it would have been instead of 3-2 in favor, it would have been 3-2 opposed, right?
Sure,
So, but what like let's just say that you were one of the two who opposed,
sure.
right? And so then you would have lost. What would you have done at that point?
Well, luckily in Florida, it's interesting that you asked that because here in Florida, just before that vote happened, the Parents' Bill of Rights law passed and was
Mhm.
signed by Governor DeSantis. So, meaning that was an illegal vote. They were, in fact, breaking the law when they passed that vote.
Okay.
Um, and I would have done the exact same thing that I did do, which was to send a letter / email directly to the governor
Mhm.
and to the Department of Education in Tallahassee, informing them. And this is what I did do, in fact, which resulted in an investigation into the county board of board school board. Sorry. So what ended up happening is they were threatened to be fined if they didn't reverse it, and
Mhm.
2 weeks later they actually did reverse it.
Gotcha.
Um,
So how do you reconcile that then with the idea of home rule, which you mentioned a moment ago?
so you know it's interesting because you can you say the law home rule and you look into it and
Mhm.
and you look at the fact that the local government is supposed to have the ultimate say so. um, and it's interesting because typically what happens is it's used in the wrong way. It's not used to protect the rights. It's used to further put the boot on the throat. It seems like.
Mhm.
I'll use that an example again. The masks, right? Um, County decided, we're not going to force masks at all in 2020, I think it was,
Okay.
and instead the City Commission of Deland said, you know what? I know the county said that they're not going to, but we're going to. So they used it in the opposite way. They went against the county and the larger government, and they said, we're going to impose stricter rules. And that's, again, that's another reason why I'm running, because if you're going to use home rule and you're going to use it in the bad way, then it's time for someone to challenge you.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, ultimately, the way you deal with a government, even locally, that's going to use the benefit to their advantage is peaceful non-compliance.
Gotcha. Okay, fair enough. So along this line of talking about like COVID, and masking, let's shift over. I want to talk about vaccination a little bit, and I realize that vaccination is not necessarily the purview
Right.
of city commission.
Hmm.
But as I did my research, as I'm supposed to do,
Sure.
the West Volusia Beacon wrote about you a while back.
Yes, they did.
Yeah, so apparently you had an organization called Volusia Parents for Freedom back in 2021,
Yeah,
correct?
I did. In fact, my wife and I founded that organization
Mhm.
immediately the day after um, the situation I was telling you about where the teacher put the mask on my kid.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay. So that's a good segue then. It looks like it
yes, sir.
worked out pretty
Yeah.
well. So apparently in this article that they wrote, now they wrote the article in 2022 about you. This occurred in 2021. But so what they said was they're talking about your organization, and they said the organization also sold T-shirts on its now deleted
Sure.
website, including one that read, "quote Ruben Colin has to go." We're not too worried too much about that. I assume that's a local matter.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then,
He's actually on the school board. He's the reason that the school board pushed mandatory masks on the students.
gotcha. And then they continue on and they say, and another with the slogan, "quote I no longer identify as unvaccinated. I
Sure.
identify as
Oh yeah.
pureblood."
Oh yeah.
So, my question is, how were the shirts received in
Not well.
Deland
Not well.
when you had them? Not well.
Not well. Not
Okay.
well. It's actually it's funny that you bring this up because I recently, I mentioned Dr. Wendy Anderson, who is currently the chair for the Soil and Water District. She is. I recently sat down and had lunch with her, and she's very widely known in political circles here in town. So we sat down and we had lunch with her, and that was something that she had brought up that a lot of left-leaning voters
Hmm.
are concerned about because they didn't get the connotation. The term pureblood they immediately associated with anti-Semitic messaging, and it's like, no, 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 that's not what I
Right.
meant.
Right.
It's strictly an untested vaccine, and it's not in my system, and therefore,
Mhm.
so it was definitely not widely received.
Gotcha. Is Deland more left leaning or right leaning?
Um, you know, if you look in terms of population, you would think because of the fact that there's a lot of older retired Democrats, a lot of there's a college here in town, Stetson University.
Mhm.
You would think that it would probably be more left leaning, but when you look into the voting, um, there's more registered Republicans than there are
Okay.
Democrats. So that
Are
leads
they
me to
more active politically, or
uh,
are they just registered?
I, both, both.
Okay.
I believe if I remember correctly from 2020, Deland uh, went for Trump.
Okay. All right. Well,
There's not a whole lot of libertarians here at all.
gotcha. All right. So the shirts didn't go over well, but okay, the shirts didn't go over well, but what about just your perspective of not vaccines, but just the mandates, and is that something that people widely shared your view, or were you kind of an uphill battle in where you live?
Um, the funny thing about Deland is there's a lot of mom and pop businesses.
Hmm.
In fact, there's probably more small businesses here than there are big businesses, and
Okay.
so the messaging of um, you know no mandates, don't tell me that I have to shut my business. So many businesses have closed here and we're not able to reopen that it's actually kind of sad to see. So the message of, don't tell me that I have to close my business while you keep Walmart open
Hmm.
definitely resonates.
Gotcha. Okay. So we're getting ready to go into the next segment. Before we do that, have my little intermission. So what I'm going to do is, Matt, I'm going to set you to the side for just a moment.
Sure.
I'll go into my little intermission. I'll bring you back in just a few minutes here. So we'll get into that. So let me go ahead and pull up my nifty little transition here. I've got two transitions that we're going to be doing. So here we
Sure.
go. All right, everyone. So let's give a quick Liberty update. One of the things that I like to do is get online and I just ask people, I say, hey, give me your Liberty report. What is it that you have been up to recently? Because I like hearing about it. Here's how here's the origin of this. I get on social media, and as we all know, social media is a nice bastion for arguing and debate and being angry at one another. And I said, you know what? I'm connected to so many libertarians. I want to hear what they're up to because I certainly can't come up with all the cool ideas. So I want to hear what other people are doing. So maybe I can copy their ideas. So the first time I did this, I got a ton of responses. The responses have been a little bit on the lighter side. So I don't know, maybe people are just too busy, you know, doing things for liberty that they can't come in and see that particular tweet or Facebook post. But for those who have, let's talk about them. So what I'm going to do, the way that I work this, I just simply say the first name. If it's a name, or if it's an internet handle, then I'll go ahead and I'll say that, as long as it's appropriate, of course. And then I just let people know what this person was doing. So in response, Craig, who, by the way, that I forgot the last time I did this Liberty Report, he said he recorded an anti-war song that he wrote about 16 years ago and hoping that it would gain some traction once he's got it mixed and remastered. And then I talked to him a little bit and I said, you know what? That's awesome work, but it's unfortunate that 16 years later, an anti-war song will still have the same level of value that it had 16 years ago, or maybe even 60. So that in itself is unfortunate, but it's great that he's doing this work, because let's face it, folks, we need to get into the space everywhere. So if you're into music, then get into the music space and put out some good music. If you're into the video space, then do that. Whatever it is that your talent is, use that for the cause of liberty. Jonathan writes that he's reevaluating his strategy for serving the market. A little on the vague side, but no worries. Sometimes you need to sit down and just take a look at things and say, you know what, where am I? And let me reevaluate. Let me make sure that I'm producing what I need to be producing. Since I wanted to add a few more, and I happen to be the chair of the affiliate here in Jacksonville, figured I'd throw out a couple of what some of the people here in our affiliate are doing. So we've got Rachel, who has recently started. She took over the newsletter, and she recently sent out a newsletter to a whole bunch of people, and we got some responses from that. So that is awesome. This newsletter lets people know what's going on in our affiliate, some of the upcoming events. Joe, he submitted a request for an upcoming Pride Festival. So we are actually going to be hosting a table there and having several of our members attend and speak with the Pride community. So that's awesome. And then Marcus, he did a great job filling in for me in this past business meeting where I could not attend because I was up visiting my nephew as he graduated from basic training. And for anybody that wants to ask, yes, as a proper libertarian, I gave him the talk. He's had all my family and friends have had all the proper talks that they should have from a libertarian. So that's just a few of the things that are going on in the Liberty community. Follow me on Facebook. Follow me. You can find me on Facebook at Liberty Dad. You can find me on Twitter at Liberty Dad Pod on Twitter, or you can send me an email to libertydadpodcast@gmail.com. Just let me know what you're up to. You send that information, you get that information to me, and then during these intermissions, I will tell people what's going on so that others can hear about it and be excited and incentivized to do some of their own work. Now, we're going to get back to Matt, and we're going to jump into our bill review. This is an interesting portion of the show. So here we go.
But I know I'll be a law someday, at least I hope and pray that I will. But today I am still just a bill.
All right, we have Matt back, and now we're going to do the bill review. The way the bill review works with the candidates, what I do is I reach out to them and I say, let me know about a bill that you have taken some level of interest in. Now, I prefer the bill to be something that is related to the scope of the position that they're running for. So if they're running for city council, then hopefully a bill that's from city council. If it's a state, like say a U.S. Senate seat, then maybe a Senate bill, so on and so forth. But it doesn't have to be. It can be any bill that they feel passionate about and they want to talk about, whether it's related to their campaign or not. So this particular bill that Matt has provided, I don't think it has a title or a name. It looks more like a resolution to me, but feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But I'm sorry?
You're right.
Okay, so what this one does, it's a city. Sometimes the city ones just maybe have a number at some point attached to them. But what this one does, it amends a previous ordinance that they. So what happened? It's called the Woodlands Crossing Amendment, and what it does is it amends the this Woodland Crossings PD that was approved by the City Commission back in 2006. So, and correct me if I get anything wrong here, but basically what it does is the developers have come back and said, "Hey, we want to modify what you've approved for us to develop here in Deland, and so we're making a request for this modification." So this is the one that Matt wants to talk about. So tell us a little bit more about this particular bill, Matt.
Sure. So again, here we are, discussing something that as from libertarians, it seems easy peasy lemon squeezy,
Mhm.
property rights. The owner of the property can typically, should be able to, from a libertarian point of view, do what they want to do with the property. But in this particular instance, um, like so many others, it's the city bringing in developers from out of town and telling them, we want this, rather than the property owner saying, this is what I want to do with my property. So what this would do is it would essentially clear cut an entire swath of property and put up hundreds of unaffordable housing, so that not only does the developer profit, but the city can also profit and benefit from the property taxes on several hundred new homes
Mhm.
versus what the citizens want. And from a liberty, on the surface, it sounds harmless enough because whatever, it's new houses,
Mhm.
but the fact that the city is seeking this out is where I have the problem. Um, and the fact that they're just completely clear cutting, and it's not just me that has a problem. They're basically destroying the resources that we have in order to make a profit.
Okay.
And to me, that just doesn't seem in the best interest for the people who already live here.
Okay. So when you say they're destroying the city resources to make a profit,
Mhm.
you are talking about the developer, or are you talking about the
This
city?
both. I mean, really
Okay.
both. The city sees it as, okay, the more houses we can pack into a small area,
Mhm.
the more property taxes we can make, and they've consistently um, kept the millage rate.
Okay.
I'm sure everybody's familiar with that. That property taxes are one thing, but then there's a millage rate that the cities get to impose.
Mhm.
Um, that, of course, adds to the property taxes. But yeah, so both really. Obviously the developers are in it to make profits because that's what businesses do. You're not going to be in
Mhm.
business to lose money. But realistically, in this particular situation, well, this, and I could give you others, like the golf course planned community that we talked about earlier. But it's really the city that's pushing for this, and it's just interesting to see that they would uh, willingly, and it happens over and over, just wipe out resources in order to put as many houses as they can into a small 40 foot lot lines. And
So let me ask you then, when it comes to development, the development is already underway. So
Mhm,
if the developer has decided, hey, you know what, we can do this, we can make it better. And I think we both agree on the idea of property rights. And
mhm,
for anybody that's watching who is not a libertarian or listening on Spotify, this episode will come out about a week later. For anybody that's hearing this, when it comes to property rights, it's usually pretty consistently absolute with libertarians. We look at it and we say, look, you have your property, you have the absolute right to use it how you want. However, there can be repercussions if what you do with your property bleeds over onto mine. So if you
right.
pour a bunch of oil into your portion of the river that's flowing, that also flows by my house, and then it destroys my portion of the river, if you will, then I have a claim against you. So that's a general, very quick rundown of how property rights tend to be viewed in the libertarian community. So we're talking about the damaging of resources. So what resources would we be damaging, and whose resources are they?
Uh, well, to name one, there's only a limited supply of water in the aquifer here.
Okay.
So by adding more houses in a much more densely packed subdivision, you're taking additional families that will need that water resources. So really, who it's going to be affected is everybody.
Okay.
Eventually, it's going to end up where Daytona is currently, where they're testing a water treatment facility and turning basically sewage water into supposedly potable water. And
Mhm.
personally, I don't know that I would want to drink that water.
Okay.
So it's that's a huge issue here in Volusia. That the water resources are being pushed to the limits, so to speak, um, and to the point where you've got cities and communities talking about treating human waste water and turning it into potentially drinkable water. And to me, that's not something I want for my family. I don't want
Mhm.
to have that kind of water pumped into my house and sold that it's drinkable.
Gotcha. Okay. So so if you were on the city commission right now, you and I assume this has not yet passed, you would actually vote against it then.
I wouldn't, as it's worded currently, yes, because what they're doing is they're adding additional houses. I wouldn't necessarily vote solely against it. I would negotiate more with the developers and find out if there's a way that we could um, make it better for the people that currently live here. Um, as it stands, these houses are going to be $400,000, and to some people that's not necessarily unaffordable, but to the people who actually work here, that is.
Mhm.
Um, the average job here, there's no technology jobs here, so it's not like people here can make $60,000 a year plus in order to make that. The average median income is actually right around 50 a year
Okay.
here, a year here. So I wouldn't necessarily, as it's worded currently, yes, I would vote against it, but solely for the reason that it's cramming more houses into the planned area
Mhm.
than I believe to be sustainable and healthy for the community.
Okay. Okay. Fair enough. So let me play devil's advocate then.
Sure.
Because you've mentioned it multiple times now about, these houses are $400,000. These aren't homes that are affordable by the current residents, but somebody's going to be buying these homes. So I
Sure.
assume it's going to be, I assume what's going to happen is this is going to bring in people from the outside who can't afford it. And would that not then create more opportunities in the long run for the residents of Deland? Because let's just say that let's say you bring in 500 new families, and 500 new families who can afford $400,000 homes, starting at like say 400,000, maybe going up from there. Uh, wouldn't that then cause businesses to look at Deland and say, hey, maybe we would like to go in there because now we've got, maybe there is some tech talent there. Maybe they're working remote and, whatever the case may be. Right. But wouldn't that ultimately be better because you have people that have a new diversity of people who have higher incomes, and higher incomes might mean newer or different jobs than exist currently in Deland. So wouldn't that isn't that kind of an argument in favor of it, or where do you sit with that?
I, I could see that argument.
Hmm.
But I would counter that argument with the fact that we are currently a college town with thousands of college students that currently are here for college. So when they graduate college, instead of staying here and leaving those resources,
Hmm.
they're spending and their skills here, they're unable to afford those skills, so they're leaving and they're going elsewhere where they can start and actually afford to live. And then also on top of the college um, age, we've also got a huge retirement community. There's a lot
Hmm.
of, they call them, they're called, it's called Old Deland.
Hmm.
It's the people who grew up here like generations. We're talking
Okay.
generations, and they're retired and therefore fixed income. Again, can't afford those. So what choices do they have? And they're leaving. So what you could argue that, bringing people who currently live in Orlando work in Orlando, make more money than what is currently able to be paid here in Deland, and they moved to Deland for, a house that they could buy for 400,000, where it would cost almost double that in Orlando,
Mhm.
and they can commute, and that's fine for them. So yeah, I could see that argument, but my question to that would be, at what cost?
Okay.
The businesses, and I'll tell you, as a resident that's lived here, my wife and I've lived in bought this house 4 years ago. We bought it officially 2 years ago, but we've lived here for 4 years in this house, and I'll tell you that the city commission tends to be standing in the way of those businesses coming here that you're talking about,
Okay.
which is an even bigger problem. For example, there's a piece of property right downtown that has been planned to be a new Jimmy Hula's restaurant for 2 years, and
Mhm.
they have held up the zoning and kicked it back and back and back. And it's, we've got an old Putnam hotel that they're jerking around with the zoning.
Mhm.
It's just, the city commission stands in the way of all of that. It's just interesting that, like, they won't stand in the way if you want to put 600 new houses, with 40-foot lots. But if you want to bring a business to Deland, then that's when they say, you know what? Maybe we'll talk about this for 2 years.
Mm. Gotcha. All right. Well, our time here is winding down. So go ahead and give us your final words and let everybody know where they can find you, how they can reach out if they would like to participate in some way with your campaign.
Sure.
Just let people know. How do they get a hold of you?
Sure. So you can find me. Obviously, the website is mattfordeland.com, and you can find me on Twitter at mattfordeland. That's my campaign Twitter. You can find me on Facebook at mattfordeland. Um, it's been a tough race. I think we've got a good shot at winning this. Based on conversations I've had with the newspaper owner, even,
Mhm.
the people here in town are tired of the same names rotating in circles between the planning commission, the zoning board, and city commission. It's the same names over and over, and it's time for a change. And I'm, trying to be that change.
All right, awesome. So if you're watching or if you're listening, make sure you go again to mattfordeland.com. Check him out. Find him on Twitter, find him on Facebook, give him a like, help push his campaign even a little bit more. We want to get as many libertarians as possible elected, get some fresh faces in there. So it's kind of a little bit of freshness of both, some fresh political voice, some fresh faces. So let's see some change coming up. Again, your uh, tongue tied there. Your race is voted on in August 23rd. So for anybody that's in Deland, make sure you get out to the polls and you vote for Matt. Matt, I want to thank you. You hold on for just a moment. We'll have a little bit of a quick after show here in just a moment, but I'm going to wrap it up here for everybody else that is watching. And I want to thank you for tuning in. And make sure that you keep up with me on Facebook or on Twitter. Again, Facebook, you can find me at Liberty Dad, all one word. You can find me Liberty Dad Pod on Twitter, or send me an email, libertydadpodcast@gmail.com. Let me know what you're doing in the Liberty community. I'll read it during the Liberty Report. Make sure that if you know of a candidate that you haven't seen on this show, let them know or send the information to me. I'll reach out to them. I want to interview as many candidates as I can. And this show is dedicated to only libertarian candidates. We are raising the voice of as many libertarian candidates as we possibly can with this show. With that, I want you to remember, if your business is people, you're, every time I ruin that one. So I'll have to work on that one and get that a little bit more memorized for a morning show. But anyway, have a great week, everyone. Catch you later catch you next time. For now, I'm out.